Most people assume the hard part of ETF investing is picking the right ones. It's not. The hard part is realizing that 3 of the 5 ETFs you already own are secretly the same ETF, just wearing different labels. Here's a scenario that happens more often than most people will admit. Someone spends a weekend doing the work, reading descriptions, comparing 10-year returns, checking expense ratios. They build what feels like a diversified high-growth portfolio, 5 different funds, 5 different tickers, reasonable logic behind each one. Then they open the actual holdings, the individual companies underneath, and something doesn't add up. The same top 10 stocks keep appearing: Nvidia, Microsoft, Apple, Broadcom, over and over across 3 of the 5 funds, not because they chose badly, but because most growth ETFs are fishing from the exact same pond, and nobody tells you that until you do the math yourself. That's not a minor issue. If your 5 diversified ETFs all tilt heavily toward the same dozen large-cap tech names, you're not running 5 strategies. You're running 1 and paying 5 separate expense ratios to feel like you built something. Here's what changes that calculation. 2 of the ETFs on this list are relatively new, and they made the list precisely because they cover ground that no other fund here touches. Not based on track record, based on where the next decade of growth is actually happening. By the end of this, you'll know which 5 funds I'd use, exactly where I'd hold each one, taxable account or IRA, and how to run an overlap test on whatever you already own, because that test is what separates a portfolio that compounds differently from one that just looks different. And before we start, I'm not a financial advisor. Everything here is educational, every trade-off is real, and I'm going to name them all. ETF 1, VOO. Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. Every system needs a foundation, something stable underneath the parts that are allowed to be more aggressive. For me, that's VOO, the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. It holds the 500 largest publicly traded US companies, and it weights each one by market size. That second part is worth slowing down on for a moment. You're not buying 500 companies equally. If you put $1,000 into VOO today, roughly $66 goes to Apple, about $63 goes to Nvidia, and somewhere around $6 goes to Costco, a company most of us actually spend money at every couple of weeks. The largest companies get the largest slices. When a company shrinks, its slice shrinks with it. No committee meeting, no human decision required. The index handles it automatically. That's the mechanism that allows this fund to sit untouched for 40 years. Over the last decade, VOO has returned approximately 13 to 14% annually. That turns $10,000 into roughly $36,000 to $37,000. Not the most exciting outcome on this list, and that's exactly the point. Its job is to be the floor, the stable base that earns everything else the right to be more volatile. I hold VOO in a taxable account, not an IRA. Here's why. If I want the option to retire early, I need money I can actually reach before a specific age. IRAs have withdrawal restrictions. VOO is a fund I plan to never touch, but it needs to be accessible if circumstances change. That logic matters more than most people realize when they're building a portfolio. ETF 2, SMH. Van Eck Semiconductor ETF. Now here's where the return gap actually becomes visible. SMH holds the 25 largest US-listed semiconductor companies. No software, no banks, just the businesses that design and manufacture the chips powering AI systems, data centers, autonomous vehicles, and modern infrastructure. It weighs by size, similar to VOO, but with one rule that fundamentally changes the dynamics. No single company can exceed roughly 20% of the fund. Whenever a holding drifts above that cap, the fund automatically sells it down and redistributes the money into everything else. That mechanism matters more than it sounds. In 2024 and into 2025, meaningful portions of SMH's gains came not from its largest holding, but from Micron, AMD, and Intel, companies sitting further down the rankings. The cap forced redistribution. Those smaller positions ended up doing the heavy lifting. That's why it's my highest conviction growth holding. Over the last 10 years, SMH has returned approximately 26 to 28% annually. That same $10,000 becomes somewhere between $110,000 and $115,000, compared to roughly $36,000 in VOO. That gap is the entire reason I don't just own the S&P fund and consider the job done. But the cost is completely real. This fund dropped over 40% from peak to trough in 2022. 4 separate times since 2018, it's fallen 27% or worse. Each time, the recovery outpaced the decline, and each time, staying still paid more than moving. But watching 40% of your portfolio disappear on paper isn't a theoretical exercise, it's a psychological test, and most people fail it. I keep SMH in my taxable account alongside VOO. This is a decades-long hold. I'm not rebalancing it based on short-term noise. ETF 3, DRAM, Round Hill Memory ETF. This one is new, and the reason it made this list is highly specific. Every AI chip needs a type of memory called high bandwidth memory, HBM, physically stacked right on top of the processor. It's not optional, it's part of the architecture. And as AI workloads scaled aggressively in 2024 and into 2025, the demand for HBM outran what the industry could actually produce. That supply gap became one of the defining constraints of the entire AI build-out. DRAM holds just 12 companies, that's it. 3 of them, Micron, Samsung, and SK Hynix, carry roughly 75% of the fund's total weight. That concentration is obviously high risk, but the demand driving it, AI training clusters, inference at scale, data center expansion, is forecast to compound at roughly 20 to 25% annually through the end of this decade. That makes HBM one of the faster-growing specific segments tied to AI infrastructure anywhere in the market. DRAM is also the only fund on this entire list that gives you direct exposure to South Korean memory manufacturers. Samsung and SK Hynix don't have accessible US listings for most retail investors. This fund is the most practical path to owning them. One potential drawback that's worth naming clearly: memory chips have always been cyclical. Supply catches up to demand. When it does, pricing drops fast, and these companies feel it immediately. I will likely need to manage this position at some point. That's why it lives in my IRA, where I can resize or exit without triggering a tax bill every time I move. ETF 4, NASA. Themes Space Innovators ETF. The second new fund on this list is the Themes Space Innovators ETF, ticker NASA. It holds approximately 35 to 40 companies across the commercial space economy, launch providers, satellite operators, and companies that own and monetize the spectrum those satellites transmit on. Unlike every other fund here, there's no passive index methodology underneath it. Holdings are selected actively. The reason this fund earned a spot has nothing to do with historical performance. It's the only fund on this entire list that doesn't overlap meaningfully with anything else I hold. Every other fund in this group is some version of a semiconductor bet wearing different packaging. This one is genuinely separate. It covers a sector most growth portfolios don't include at all, inside an industry that's projected to grow significantly as satellite connectivity, commercial launch, and space-based data services scale through the decade. The honest risk: most companies in this fund don't generate significant profits yet. The commercial space economy is a long thesis that may take longer to reach scale than optimistic projections suggest. And this fund has pulled back meaningfully from its highs, which makes the current entry point more reasonable than it was at the peak, but also illustrates exactly how volatile it can be. Small position, IRA only, full ability to resize when the thesis shifts. ETF 5, QTUM, Defiance Quantum ETF. The last fund works differently from everything else on this list. QTUM holds approximately 76 to 80 companies, depending on the most recent rebalance, and every position lands at roughly 1 to 1.5%. Nothing in here can sink the fund on its own, but nothing can carry it single-handedly either. That's the design choice. Here's the part that surprises most people. Only about 12% of QTUM is tied to pure quantum computing companies. The rest spans machine learning infrastructure, advanced computing hardware, and next-generation chip architectures. It's less a quantum computing fund and more a broad-based bet on the next layer of computational infrastructure. About 20% of the holdings are foreign-listed companies, including Taiwanese designers like MediaTek that your S&P 500 fund won't hold. For most investors, QTUM is one of the only practical paths to owning those businesses. The equal weight construction is simultaneously the appeal and the limitation. If quantum computing concentrates in 2 or 3 companies, this fund captures each of them at 1% rather than leaning in hard. That's the trade-off for breadth. You don't get the upside of concentration, but you also don't get destroyed by picking the wrong winner. Given how violently this sector moves on individual announcements, IRA, no question. Portfolio allocation. Here's how I'd spread $100 across these 5, based specifically on my age and risk tolerance. Your situation is different, and this is a starting point, not a recommendation. 40% goes to VOO, taxable account, never touch it. 40% goes to SMH, taxable account, never touch it. 10% goes to DRAM, IRA, actively monitor, expect to manage. 5% goes to QTUM, IRA, occasional rebalance. 5% goes to NASA, IRA, small, long thesis. 80% of the capital sits in 2 funds I can genuinely leave alone for decades. That stability is what earns the other 3 the right to be as speculative as they are. The moment you have to worry about the volatile 20% disrupting your sleep, the calm 80% is the thing that lets you hold on. Notice that the 2 cheapest funds are also the 2 I never plan to touch. That isn't a coincidence. And the 2 newest funds are the 2 with the smallest allocations. That also isn't a coincidence. Track record and position size should move together. No strategy is perfect, but these 2 rules take a lot of the guesswork out of how much to bet on things you can't fully predict yet. Before you add any ETF, new or established, open the holdings. Map what you actually own across your entire portfolio, not just what the marketing description says. An ETF called Diversified Growth and one called Technology Innovation can easily hold the exact same top 10 names. The goal was never to own more funds, it was to own funds that each cover ground the others don't. The 2 newer ETFs on this list, DRAM and NASA, made the cut not because their histories are long. They made the cut because the sectors they access don't appear anywhere else in this group. Memory infrastructure that AI physically cannot run without, a commercial space economy that most portfolios haven't touched at all. One more thing worth leaving with. Most investors spend the most time evaluating the funds they're excited about. The better habit is to evaluate how each fund interacts with everything else you already own. The edge isn't usually in the individual fund, it's in the gaps between them. Tell me in the comments which of these 5 you'd argue with, or which fund you think should have been on this list instead. I'm especially curious whether anyone's running a meaningful position in the space economy yet, and what you think the entry case looks like from here.